It's back, and no, I haven't cancelled the podcast. This is the I Will Teach You a Language podcast, episode 153.
Welcome to the I Will Teach You a Language podcast. Weekly motivation and language learning tips to help you become fluent in any language. Now, here's your host, Ollie Richards.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast, and welcome to Hong Kong. 歡迎你嚟到香港. I am in Hong Kong, and that explains partly the delay in the most recent episodes. I've lost count of the number of people who have messaged me and emailed me asking, what's going on with the podcast? And it's been on Facebook, on Instagram, it's been on Twitter, all over. So the benefit, I guess, of me being a bit slack over the last couple of weeks is that I really kind of noticed that you guys actually miss the podcast when it's not here. And that's good for me because it keeps me motivated and it makes me realize that actually you guys are listening and you enjoy it. And that is really fantastic for me. So I'm sorry for the short hiatus. I've moved from London to Hong Kong for a period of a few months. And to be totally honest, it's just been a little bit too much to continue everything and to record the podcast at the same time. So that's why there's been a delay, but I'm back on track now. I'm going to make sure that we stick to the schedule. I might even throw in a few bonus episodes as well to keep you entertained over Christmas. But today, we are back on track. And before we start the episode today, I'd like to thank the sponsors of the show. Of course, the wonderful iTalki. And if you're looking for a language teacher, iTalki is the place to do it. You can get a wide variety of teachers and take lessons anywhere you want. I've had lessons in my car, at work, but just don't tell my boss about that. At home, in the cafes, and it's just fantastic, very, very flexible, very easy. And if you'd like to get a free lesson, then you can go to iwillteachyoualanguage.com/free lesson. Now, since I've come to Hong Kong and I'm kind of starting a new mini life here, even though it's just for a few months, I thought I would take a second to talk about traveling and learning languages when you travel. Because I think a lot of people have these kind of dreams and these images of thinking like, if only I could travel abroad, if only I could go and live in Japan, I'd be fluent in Japanese in no time. But I think, as any of you who have lived abroad will know, it's not necessarily the case. Now, I've met people who have moved abroad for some time and become very fluent. I'm thinking about a friend of mine, Alex, who is, he spent last year in Hong Kong, actually, on a university exchange, and he was here for like a year of, I think, 14 months, and he went from like zero in Cantonese to speaking really fluently over that time, better than me. And that's, it's fantastic. And I've met a few people who do that. Generally, people who succeed effortlessly in learning languages when they go abroad tend to be very social, very outgoing. Often they get thrust into a situation like a university exchange, for example, where you're surrounded by other people who speak the language. You need to talk to people. But if you're not like extremely kind of extroverted, if you're like me and you don't just like kind of randomly talking to strangers on the street and stuff, and you're not in a situation like in a university or in a job where everyone around you speaks the language, you've got to create your own opportunities. And if you've ever been abroad to learn a language, you will have learned probably that it's not necessarily as easy as you think. There are all kinds of things that can stand in the way. And I've talked about this before, so I'm not going to go into a great deal of depth. But I think my main feeling about moving abroad is, because I've lived in France, in Brazil, Argentina, Japan, Qatar, Egypt, and now for a short time in Hong Kong. I've had very similar experiences in every single place, and I think that the main thing for me is when you go to live abroad, especially if you go on your own, you kind of yanked yourself out of your normal life, and suddenly you can start to feel quite lonely. You don't have your friends, you don't have the food you want, you don't have your routine, lots of things you don't have. And so our need to feel comfortable, to feel at home, and to make a life for ourselves can lead us to make decisions that aren't necessarily very helpful for language learning. A lot of people find that they move abroad and fall in with a group of expats who they go drinking with or something like that, or fall in with a group of people that speak very good English because it's just easier and more fun that way. And if you're not careful, before you know it, you can be living abroad with a life that is in English. So in many cases, you may as well just have stayed at home. So I'm going to talk about a few things that I've been doing in Hong Kong to create the environment that I need to improve my Cantonese. And I've been speaking to a few friends of mine before I went, asking them for some tips on this. And my friend Kyle from Sensible Chinese gave me a few great tips. Yan Van Der from Language Boost, he gave me some good tips as well. And I've kind of been doing it my own way, I think. But here are, in no particular order, some of the things that I've been doing in Hong Kong to create this Cantonese environment for myself. So first of all is the point that I do not particularly like just kind of talking to random people on the street. They're usually short interactions. You don't learn very much. And in a place like Hong Kong, often the people that you speak to will speak great English as well. And they're just used to speaking to everybody in English here because, English is kind of the lingua franca, especially if you look like me with blonde hair and blue eyes. So because I know this because it's happened to me a bunch of times before. So what I've been doing is to create dedicated opportunities to speak. I know that if I don't do anything special, I won't get much Cantonese practice. And so what I've been doing is I've been going to language exchange websites, particularly conversationexchange.com and mylanguageexchange.com, and I've been finding people who want to do exchanges in English and Cantonese. The good thing for me is I have time whilst I'm here, so I can afford I have the time to do a language exchange where, we maybe spend a bit of time speaking English and then a bit of time speaking Cantonese. And what that does is it means that every time I hang out with someone that I meet from these sites, I get guaranteed time speaking Cantonese. And last week I basically dedicated to doing that. I met some great people and spent lots of time, an hour or two at a time speaking Cantonese, and that's great. A lot of these people are also very cool, so I'm gonna hang out with them more. And it's kind of like it's creating opportunities to meet people who understand what you're going through, and so I now know that every day, if I choose to arrange these language exchanges every day, I can get that guaranteed practice. And that's really, really important because already, in the last couple of weeks, I felt my confidence has started to grow. When I first came here, I had no confidence in Cantonese. It's crazy. I've been learning it for years, a couple of years. And because I've just been doing it through online lessons, through studying with books, I can say lots of stuff. But I'm not very good at that kind of daily interaction that you only get from living and surrounding yourself with people. So that's the first thing I've been doing to create dedicated opportunities to speak, even though in theory it should be easy. But here, certainly, it's not. The second thing is that living here in Hong Kong, the big benefit for me, the main thing that I can learn here that I can't learn back in London, for example, is daily vocabulary. And so I've learned so much stuff in the last couple of weeks that you would never learn on a Skype lesson, for example. So things like the word for platform in the metro, or the way to say something like, I'm going to start eating first, or asking for directions. These kind of daily interactions and vocabulary that you need to kind of get around in your daily life. These are the things that really you get the opportunity to learn very quickly when you live abroad. And so I've been prioritizing that. Every time I come across a new word, especially something that is really useful in daily life like that, I stick it straight in my flashcards. I've talked about this many times before. Flashcards are super useful for so many reasons, but one of the most useful things about flashcards is whenever you learn a new word, you can just get your phone out and quickly type it into your flashcards, and then you've got a record of it there. So vocabulary for daily life goes straight into my flashcards, and so yeah, I capture absolutely everything. I make it a point of every time I hear something new, it always goes into my flashcards. Now, the other side of that is keeping a record of things that I want to be able to say. So let me see if I can think of an example. Not sure if I can think of something straight away, but when you are in another country and you think, I really want to be able to say that. Last night I was coming home, and for some reason the octopus card, which is like your metro card that lets you in and out of the metro, it didn't register. There was some problem. So when I came out of the metro, it didn't let me out. So I had to go to the guy and I had to ask him, I had to tell him that there was some problem. And I couldn't think of the best way to say the card wouldn't let me out. I mean, I know that's a very kind of English way of saying it, and I'm sure they have a different way of expressing that here, but I didn't know how to say that. And so what I did was I used my flashcards again to write down that thing that I didn't know how to say. So on a separate deck in my flashcards, I've got this huge list now of things in English that I would like to be able to say in Cantonese. And so next time I hang out with one of my language exchange partners, I can simply say to them, look, I've got all of these things I want to be able to say. Can you tell me how to say them? And then they tell me, and I can put the translations there into my flashcards. So that's really, really useful to, again, make sure that I'm building up the ability to say things that I need to say on a daily basis. Hopefully my Metro card won't keep blocking me, but again, it's still all useful stuff, right? Now, the next thing is that I think when you're living abroad, you only need 1 or 2 great connections to form a really good learning environment. I always find that you don't need hundreds of friends. It's always nice, but you don't need to know hundreds of people and to be doing everything. Often, you can just meet one person or 2 people who you really get on with, and then, for a language project, maybe they're happy to speak to you in Cantonese, or maybe they don't speak very good English. And if you meet a couple of people like that, that can create your best impossible environment. You can hang out with them every day. You can get them to help you with things. But in order to meet those people, you've got to roll the dice. Meaning you've got to go out and put yourself in situations where you're going to meet as many people as possible. So one of the things I've been doing is going to as many different kind of social events as possible. And meetup.com is fantastic for that. There's all kinds of like language meetups, social meetups, pub crawls, things like that. In the first couple of weeks here, I've been going out to as many of these things as possible to try and meet those, those 1 or 2 people who can become really good friends and can really, really help me out. So that's the next thing. Number 5 is commuting time. Now, depending on where you live, the place where I'm staying in Hong Kong, which is Yunlong, which is out in the new territories, it takes me about 45 minutes to actually get into central Hong Kong, and so it's quite easy just to kind of sit back on the metro and do nothing or listen to podcasts or something. But I've been using that daily commuting time for study. And sometimes it takes a bit of effort to kind of pull yourself up and get that book out and start studying on the train. But because I'm doing that, that gives me an extra hour and a half, 45 minutes each way, every single day of studying. So it's really important, even though you're living abroad, you've got to still use the time you have for studying because it all compounds. Likewise, and this is number 6, I'm always using my dead time for revision. Whenever I'm waiting for a bus or waiting for someone or whatever, I always just get out my flashcards and I try to hammer through the vocabulary that I'm trying to learn. And I think the point here is like, don't stop studying just because you're living abroad. Like, don't fall into that trap of thinking, oh, cool, I'm living abroad now, so I don't need to study because I'll just learn. No, it doesn't work like that. You have to keep studying. So I'm really using all of the free time that I've got to keep learning, memorize vocabulary, find out how to say certain things. It's all really, really useful. You've got to keep studying. The last thing that I've been doing is, and this is very Ollie, really, this is very me, but it's something that everybody can do, and it's to just look for ways to involve yourself a little bit more in the language. So one of the things that I've started doing here is to actually create my own materials, and it's something that I started doing in London, actually, to finding Cantonese friends to actually make recordings for me and to start to so to basically make recordings of Cantonese being spoken in real situations. And what I'm doing is I'm taking that, and I have a friend, Israel, who is transcribing and translating all of that stuff into English, and I use it as study material. It's really super useful. And what's going to happen is that after some time, after I've built up this big library of Cantonese material, that's something that hopefully is going to be useful for hundreds of other people out there to study with as well. And so I'm kind of thinking, right, it would be cool to create these Cantonese materials as a service for the Cantonese learning community, because there's not much material out there for Cantonese. So I'm kind of thinking, how can I find people around the place who would be willing to help me do that? And as a result, I've asked around a few different people here, and I said, hey, would you be up for helping me, record some Cantonese conversations and making this material? And people have said, yeah, that sounds really cool, and they're really up for it. And so I've met some more people through that as well. So really, the point of this is think outside the box. You've got to be proactive. You've got to create opportunities. And by doing a combination of all these things, I've found that I'm kind of meeting people here. I'm speaking much more of the language than I might otherwise, and just generally having a really good time. Okay, so I hope this is useful for you if you are living abroad right now, or if you're thinking about going abroad. Hopefully this will provide a little bit of inspiration, some food for thought about how you can make more out of the experience. If you'd like to leave a comment on the episode or go to any of the links that I've mentioned today, you can go to IWTYALanguage.com/episode 153 to let me know your thoughts. Now, if you would like to ask me a question, then please go to IWTYALanguage.com/ask, and I try to answer every question that comes through. And at the end of every episode, I like to leave you with a resource of some kind on the topic of the show. Today I'm going to give you a quote. It's been a while since we've done a quote, but I think this one really nicely sums up my mentality whilst I'm here, and in general my attitude to language learning. And it's a quote by Francis Bacon, and he said, "A wise man will create more opportunities than he finds." Thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode of the podcast. Take care.